Chapter 3 Alice's First Exploration. As Brian drew a long breath, Alice recognized the signs of an incipient lecture about the reality of living with diabetes and took the opportunity to slip out of the room. It wasn't that she didn't appreciate the danger her brother was in. She did, but she'd heard thousands of versions of this talk over the course of her lifetime. She had no intention of sticking around to hear it one more time. Let Brian have his romance adventure. Fine. She was done with romance anyway. This was her chance to try and figure out what was really going on. Her brother hadn't had time to register more than surprise and outrage at this strange turn of events, but Alice's introduction to time travel had been very much unlike his. No fancy bed for Alice Latimer, no sister to help ease the transition, and definitely no helpful valet or closet full of yummy clothes. She'd found herself naked on the floor, a nightgown and robe folded beside her, and a scrawled note on top of them. "Talk to me," she muttered, but so far no one appeared in her orbit. Just as well. There's something about waking up in an empty bedroom of a gloomy English castle with your brother unconscious in the room next to you to make a girl a tiny bit suspicious of anyone else in the room who happened to be standing around at the time. And that included the valet, Reginald, who she'd found lurking just outside the bedroom door when she'd ventured out. He'd introduced himself and shown her right to Brian's room. And yes, he seemed more helpful than sinister, but that didn't mean she trusted him. So, channeling her inner Nancy Drew, Alice slipped along the carpeted hallway, looking about. At a glance, Castle Dartmoor was failing to live up to the castle part of its name. Maybe the original castle had burned down or been sacked in the medieval days, but there was a distinct lack of a moat and damp stone walls of the sort that might withstand a siege. Nothing looked obviously medieval. On the other hand, she couldn't spy anything like an electrical plug or a charging station or an air conditioning vent that might indicate the place was obviously modern. All she saw was a fancy, old-fashioned house with its creaky staircase and picturesque window curtains billowing in the ocean breeze. The only thing suspicious about the building itself was the way in which it was eerily similar to the place Cousin Jessica had chosen for her destination wedding. Alice's lips twisted in a grim smile that sort of made the dimples tuck in at the corner of her mouth. She had a vague memory of the layout of the wedding venue because she had explored with her cousin when they went through the place before Jessica had put down the hefty deposit. That, and a rudimentary knowledge of 19th century culture, could be the only thing standing between Brian and early death by diabetic coma. Alice thought, not the deepest of skill sets to face a situation that seemed to include being 200 years in the past, surrounded by mysterious strangers, a life and death version of the dating game, and a complete lack of medical care if they should happen to get stuck there. But that's what she had, and she was determined to do her best. Alice shivered in the chill and deliberately crossed to the window and closed it, a small gesture that nonetheless helped her feel more in charge of the situation. She tiptoed on icy bare feet down the hall. There was no reason to go slow, really, but she was exploring as she went, looking for a wadded-up candy wrapper that would scream, "Just kidding," at the whole situation. When she reached the door at the end of the hall, Alice murmured, "Aha, what do we have here?" She had always been one of those people who saw faces in random places, like in clouds or her toast, or in the pattern of certain wallpapers. She also had always spoken to inanimate objects and even given them names. There had been Maurice, a brown Ford Pinto inherited from an elderly aunt, which, despite being given to her for free, had easily consumed $100 a month in bills all through high school and college, but which Alice had been unable to give up, as he'd seemed so good-natured and willing to make an effort. Spike, her faithful blender, and the spider plant on her desk at work she had named Peter Parker. The family sofa she had dubbed the Orange Ark, which had stuck, later evolving into Archie in family parlance. Her ex-husband had thought the habit was childish and made no bones about telling her both privately and later in front of his friends as part of his never-ending series of so-called jokes about silly old Alice, which hadn't been funny even at the time. Inner Alice thought both then and now that talking to inanimate objects was just a nice thing to do. Who knew? Maybe they had feelings too. Anyway, she told the door as she opened it, he's not part of my life anymore, and it doesn't do anyone any harm at all if I thank you for letting me through. So, thanks. She thought the creak of the hinges sounded happy when she shut the door behind her. I wonder where this goes, she said, and by the flicker of a convenient candelabra saw a hallway barely wide enough for a person to pass through. Ooh, this must be a secret passage for the servants, she whispered, feeling very sleuthy indeed. Yes, as she followed the narrow hall, she could hear a slightly muffled version of Brian and the valet's conversation through the walls. At the end of the hall was a door, which practically opened itself when she touched the handle, inviting Alice to explore. Thanks again, she said. On the other side of the door was a narrow stairway, clearly akin to this narrow hall and intended for servants to use to better get around the castle. Some of the stairs went down, but the ones going up looked much better lit. Alice ventured up the stairs, which soon put her on the roof. Oh my, she gasped. This is lovely. If there had been any doubt that this was where she had gone to sleep last night, it vanished now. She was at the top of what was definitely a tower, and around her were rolling green hills dotted with white sheep, and overhead spread blue skies flecked with clouds. The castle itself was perched atop a cliff, and about half the horizon was ocean. Never had Alice seen so far or breathed air so clean. Closer to the castle, the grounds were laid out with geometric precision, flowers to one side and gardens and orchards on the other, obviously meant for the practical and aesthetic needs of those who lived there. All at once, Alice decided the house needed a name. Well done, Carl. Please, she said again. Well done, Carl the Castle. Thank you very much. Somewhere over the ocean, a seagull called. Somewhere else, much nearer, a loose shutter banged in the gentle sea breeze. My lady, a voice gasped in astonishment, and Alice, the lady in question, whirled to confront a very surprised housemaid, arms laden with linens which she was clearly carrying out to be shaken in the morning breeze. The maid's eyes widened as she took in Alice's nightgown, cap, and robe. Definitely not the sort of thing suitable for someone who was supposed to be the mistress of the house. The maid looked brimful of astonished questions, but was clearly waiting for Alice to speak first. That's right, Alice realized. I'm in the past. I'm the boss here, and I should say something. Lovely view, she blurted, the first thing not an obscenity to pop into her head. Yes, m'lady, said the maid, mystified but willing. "What better way to start the day than enjoying the view?" said Alice, waving her arm vaguely out over the countryside. "Yes, my lady," said the maid, in almost the same tone, clearly deciding that agreement with whatever Alice happened to say was the safest way to go. "Fresh air, sunshine, hills, lawn, so nice. View." Alice didn't so much finish as run out of gas. She laced her fingers together to keep from fiddling with her hair ties, and was rewarded for even trying to end that sentence by the arrival of a broad-faced woman with faded ginger hair and a businesslike, bustling way about her. Alice decided she had to be the housekeeper. "Mrs. Downs," said the maid, not quite snapping to attention, but clearly relieved to be able to pass the responsibility for wayward ladies in their nightgowns onto somebody higher up the food chain. "My lady was saying she liked the view," she said. "And liked the air," she added, then indicated that she was done with any further part of the conversation by taking the linens to the lines waiting for them and hurriedly putting them up for airing. "Is that the case, Lady Alice?" said the housekeeper, Mrs. Downs. Yes," said Alice, who realized that this person had no need to practice bossing people around. Clearly, she was a natural at it, in almost a friendly, very confident way that Alice sensed would be very comforting to those who liked to be told what to do, and a little annoying to those who did not. "No doubt we are all excited to have so many visitors at the castle this weekend," said Mrs. Downs, with a smile for the maid and a measuring sidelong glance for Alice. "I'm certain we don't want Miss Latimer to catch a cold. I will escort her to her chamber. There are one or two details about this week's entertainments I would be grateful to have a chance to discuss with you, Lady Alice," she added benevolently, "when you have had a chance to get dressed. Let's go and get that taken care of, shall we?" She put her hand on the small of Alice's back as if to escort her. "Talk with me," Mrs. Downs said. "What did you say?" Alice stopped in surprise. "Walk with me," said Mrs. Downs, without missing a beat, and gave Alice a discreet shove. Alice stumbled into motion. She was thrilled. Nancy Drew had discovered a clue. Fire up the snappy blue roadster. The game's afoot.